Hi, my name's Kaz and I'm the creator of the Gravity Technique. And today we're discussing fascia-informed yoga. So we're going to talk about what fascia is, what it does, and why a knowledge of it in your yoga practice can be useful. So with this in mind, once we've talked about fascia, we're going to then see if we can bring that into some yoga postures. And they're just going to be the really basic foundational postures that maybe get a little bit overlooked sometimes and can become a little bit habitual in our practice. So whether you're a movement teacher or whether you're a yoga practitioner, a working knowledge of fascia and the connective tissue body can be really, really useful. So what is fascia? So fascia is kind of a new name on the block. You might have heard it being bandied around if you're a yoga teacher. And basically it's a connective tissue webbing that covers your muscles, covers your bones, and covers lots of other structures in the body. And what it does is it brings together all the components of the body. So in our original teaching under the biomechanics schematic, and if you've done your yoga teacher training, you would have had a look at that, we're taught that we contract a muscle and release another muscle, and we have movement. And that is true to an extent, but it's quite a reduced view of how we move. So what fascia does is it changes the game slightly, because it takes those muscles and then joins them into the bones, and then joins them into all the adjoining muscles. So we start to end up, and forgive the food analogy, but we start to end up with sausage strings of muscles that run all the way through the body. So that connects your arm into your chest and down into your pelvis, connects your legs up into your waist and then all the way up into your head. So it changes the way that we move, and rather than that, as I say, that individual isolation and manipulation to create movement, it changes our yoga postures, for the purpose of this video, into a body-wide event. And the way that I like to describe it is, we can't throw a stone into the pond and just get ripples on one side. You throw the stone in the pond, you get ripples right across the surface area of the body of water, and it's exactly the same in the movement in the body. So we're never just looking at one part of the body, we're looking at how everything connects together, and how if I'm moving one part of the body, it's deeply affecting other parts of the body as well. And it changes the way that we approach yoga. As you know, the foundation of yoga is that introspective practice to start to know ourselves on a deeper level. And a working knowledge of the connective tissue body helps us to explore our inner landscape on a physical level. So fascia is a lattice work of tubules, and it's kind of like this nice webbing that covers over all the muscles, all the bones, and it's underneath the skin. And within those tubules is cerebral spinal fluid, which is a deeply healing agent within the body. So we start to see how coming into a practice of yoga and moving our bodies and stretching our bodies and creating space in our bodies actually helps the cerebral spinal fluid to move around the body and promotes our health and wellness. We've all talked about that yoga glow that we get from prolonged practice. So with that in mind, where do we start with fascia? So we start to understand that it is responsible for our proprioception, and that's the messages in your body that are being fed back to your brain about where you are in space. There's also kinesthetic awareness, which is the awareness of where your joints are in space. And by listening to the messages that the fascia is giving back to the brain, helps us just to be more aware of our body positioning in our movements, but also helps to create a spaciousness through the body. we find that through habitual movement patterns, and this can be in our day-to-day lives or in our chosen movement modality, we get into these habits and we just have the same muscle firing sequences over and over again. So if you're anything like me, I know my downward dog would love to just be all shoulders and not much else. So when we have this working knowledge of the connections of the muscles via the fascial body, then we find that actually arms plug into the solar plexus, you know, legs plug into the solar plexus. So my downward dog now becomes not just about shoulders, but it becomes a whole body event. And I start to build in your mind, or we start to build in our minds, and it's almost like a puzzle, this complete picture of our body and what it's doing. And with that in mind, now we start to find that muscles that might be overworking can relax and release, and muscles that are underworking because they're not the muscles that habitually the brain employs for a particular movement starts to wake up and become functional again. So it can be a very potent, very powerful aspect to bring into your practice. So we'll get started with feeling fascia, as obviously it's feeding back to the body. And there have been teachers that have gone before that have talked about, you know, this voice of the body, the song of the body. And it's really interesting to notice that the response of the fascial body back to the brain, or the messages back to the brain, can take anywhere sort of 1 to 3 minutes. So it's quite a slow response compared to our thinking mind, which responds, you know, instantly. So we're going to try this out for ourselves. So we're going to come down into semi-supine. So just coming down to the floor, and if you need a block for under your head, do take that. So we're feeling our feet, and we're just coming down. We feel the back of the hips, the shoulders, and the back of the head. And we just make ourselves comfortable here for a moment. And we're just noticing those habitual patterns of the body here. And it's really interesting to remember, it's really important to remember that nothing is ever wrong or bad or, you know, needs correcting. For us, it's just having a wander around inside the body and just noticing. So I want you to bring your awareness to your feet and just notice if one foot is heavier on the ground than the other. And then just bringing your awareness into your hips and noticing if one side of the hips is heavier on the ground than the other. And if there is one that's heavier on the ground than the other, we don't go to that side. We go to the lighter side and we pretend that we've got a gravity button underneath. In this case, we'll use the feet. But if we've got a gravity button underneath that lighter foot and we pull it down into the ground. And you might find that there's some muscles that feel like they're holding on around the hips, need to let go. And just noticing that the body can adjust itself. We don't need to do so too much. So then we're going to come into the hips and just taking a gravity button underneath the lighter side, pull that down into the ground. And you might find that the spine starts to extend depending on what you've been doing for the day. If you've been sitting at the desk, you might need a little bit more. You might find that the spine wants a bit more space. And we tend to lengthen out on the floor. Then we've got that surface area of the ribs onto the ground, and we just want to touch equal across the back of the ribs. So if you've got a side that's lighter, just again, remember, just bringing that gravity button underneath and pulling that down into the ground. And then finally, shoulder blades. Now, if it's nice to bring the arms up over your body, now I like to do this. Some people like their arms down here, but for me, I like the weight of the arms pulling me back into the shoulders, because we're going to take our shoulder blades and we want nice flat plates of the shoulder blades, but that might not be the case. You might find that the shoulder blade is on its edge, or one shoulder blade is on the ground, the other one isn't. And again, we're just going to imagine that lovely gravity coming up out of the ground, wrapping around the shoulder blades and pulling the shoulder blades equally down into the ground. So we've got an even pull on each side, and then just noticing what happens with the back of your head. We've got this lovely broadness on the back of the head. The eyes can soften back into the sockets. The jaw softens back into the back of the head. So we just start to rebalance through the body, and this is really useful if you know that maybe you've got one hip higher than the other, or you've got a rotation in the ribs, or you've got one shoulder that's higher than the other, or one shoulder that's more forward than the other. So we just use gravity and the ground and your breath. It's all we need. We don't need anything else than that, and just taking time to relax. Now remember, fascia and its response back to the brain anywhere between 1 and 3 minutes. So you can really take your time with this. And as a movement teacher, it's a great way to start your yoga class, because then you know that all the students in front of you, their bodies have had a moment to unwind and allow the day to melt away into the ground. This is good. So from here, we're just going to come over onto whichever side is comfortable for you. Coming all the way over, pressing up, and we're going to come up to standing. So from here, we're just going to look at Tadasana. So this very basic foundation pose. Now, in some traditions of Tadasana, we put the feet together and we stand very straight like soldiers. But actually, when we want to look at Tadasana from a fascia-informed point of view, we want to get connected with the gravity line through the body into the ground. And again, that brings us back to habitual movement patterns. Now, for many of us, we find that the body weight is very much back in the heels with the knees locked back and, the shoulders up. And this is true for many of us. And as I say, there's nothing wrong with that. But maybe we can just use fascia, or our knowledge of fascia, our gravity and the ground, to bring ourselves into something that might be slightly more useful. So if you're hypermobile, if you know that you're hypermobile, or you've got students who are hypermobile, I am one, and you can put your knees all the way back, take your knees out of the equation, get them bent. It's good. We don't need them. The knees aren't a load-bearing organ. That's a whole nother video, but they shouldn't be used as that. So just take a moment with the knees bent to notice where your preferred body weight drop is. So it might be that that is towards the back of the heel with the toes slightly off the floor, or it might be forwards towards the toes. But you find where you are, and it's just taking an assessment. And then from here, we're just going to bring in our mind's eye down into the ground how our feet are made up. So we've got these heels, these round heels. I call them snooker ball heels because it makes them round and shiny and heavy. Now, if we are in the back outer edge of the snooker ball heel, can we imagine that front face of the snooker ball heel and which looks down into the toes? Now, the toes are really, really long, going down towards the balls of the feet, arches of the feet. So can we imagine that front face of the snooker ball heel, and can we pull it down into the ground? Now, this is going to bring the body weight forwards. And if this is destabilizing for you, just grab a piece of wall or whatever's near you to just help you, because we're going to work with the balance a little bit here. So as I say, toes are like icebergs. We've got this lovely stumpy bit on the end, but actually the bony process of the toe will take you to the ankle. And actually the tendinous toe takes you through the ankle and into the back of the knee. So actually toes are way longer than we actually give them credit for. And we're very interested in behind the balls of the feet. Now again, we've got that lovely gravity button that we can pull down into the ground. So we've got the front of the snooker ball heel behind the balls of the feet, and that starts to bring us more into the center of the foot. Now we're going to drop the kneecaps. So if you find that your kneecaps are holding on, front of the legs holding on, we're going to drop that and release that. Feel that the front of the hips can let go and the back of the pelvis can come forwards just a little bit. And we start to utilize the whole foot. And just having a play there. Notice what's happening in the pelvic floor. Notice what's happening in the low spine. Notice what's happening underneath the ribs. We get this lovely lift and softening that's happening. And we start to get space in the ankles, space in the knees, space in the hips. Now, if you find that your body weight now, because of course we're in the feet, that your body weight is very much on the inside of the feet or on the outside of the feet, again, can we make touch equal? Can we find the long little toe side down into the ground and the inside of the heel and the big toe joint down into the ground? So we get the arch lift. And again, this gives you space in the knees. You'll feel the response, maybe in the side of the ankle, but definitely on the inside of the knees. And that upward lift through spine. Now we're nearly at the end of this video, but if we keep playing with this foundation for Tadasana, it starts off very dynamic, creating space, and upward lift takes us all the way out through the crown of the head, but it brings us back to, you know, that original mountain pose. Now, mountains don't balance on the earth, they're made of the earth. And we are the same. Gravity pulls us down into the ground. And the connective tissue is a tensional network which fires a little bit like the inside of a tennis ball and recoils us up towards the sky, creating space and strength in the body. So have a practice with that, have a play with it. Leave me a comment and let me know how you get on, because I'm always really interested. It's purely experiential, and we approach it with almost like a childlike quality, a playful quality. So have a play with that. And if you want to work with me further, you can find me here on the Yoga Alliance. As I say, my name is Kaz and I'm the creator of the Gravity Technique. And thank you so much for spending time with me today talking about fascia and how we can bring it into our yoga practice.